Good morning. Oops. Thank you all so much for joining us here. There we go. I think it's going to be my little leash here. So it's wonderful to be back here in Unity of Tallahassee. And I was looking in my computer on the schedule and realized that we've been here 5 times. This is our 6th time. We were here giving, the first time was back in 1991 with Julie Keene was the minister. Anybody here then? All right. Wow, we got some old timers. And then in 1995 with Sonny Stone. And then in 1997, in between ministers at that point, I think. And then 2004 and 2019 with Reverend Bill. And now again, 2025. And it's really fantastic, I think, to remember that we're, as Unity, we're part of a much larger movement. And Madeline and I have been really blessed to spend the last 35 years just traveling to Unity churches all over the United States and worldwide, actually. Australia and Europe and all over the place. And realize that this is a movement that I think in many ways is one of the healthiest movements on our planet, in the sense that it's really based at a very profound level in the concept of inclusiveness. Everyone is welcome here. It's inclusive in that sense, and also it includes all the world's wisdom traditions. It doesn't say we have the one right answer and you got to believe this or you're not going to make it. There's this underlying connection with a sense of honoring the human heritage and our spiritual wisdom traditions. And my focus has mainly been over the years has been sort of Asian traditions, but I've also for quite a few years I taught college courses in comparative religion. I love all the religions. They all essentially agree on the main points: to love each other, the golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself, and the other big one is whatever you sow, so shall you reap, in body, speech, and mind. So the more we understand these teachings, I think, the better. But the underlying teaching also in all the world religions, as well as in Unity, is the idea that each one of us is responsible to connect with our own inner wisdom, what I refer to as our inner guidance system. Charles Fillmore is kind of famous for saying, we should go straight to headquarters, right? You know that? Go straight to headquarters. And I always think, gosh, he had it easy. All he had to do to go straight to headquarters was just ask Myrtle. And and I have it easy too. I can just ask Madeline. But everybody else, I don't know what you do. No, the basic idea really is that we have within us our intuitive wisdom, an inner guidance that we can learn to connect with and that can guide us to live our lives. And it doesn't mean that our life suddenly is easy and we can just have never any problems or any challenges anymore. But it does mean that we're living our life authentically, our unique life. And that basically connects us, I feel, with an inner wellspring of joy that we all have if we just drill deep enough into our own true nature, beyond the levels of whatever it is, fear and guilt and regret and this and that and the other. We get down to this eternal wellspring of joy that always bubbles at the core of our being, and it needs no reasons in the outer world at all. It's just our true nature. And that is available to us all the time. And I think especially when we are living our life, when we're connected with our own inner guidance system, and we're facing the challenges and we're doing our best, but we're connected with that inner wisdom that guides us. And we can all do that. And I think that's really the core of the spiritual life in many ways, because when we come to this earth, we are indoctrinated. We're like a little sponge, and we just soak up everything, right? Their language becomes my language, their food becomes my food, their attitudes become my attitudes. The whole thing, we just take it all in. And one of the things we take in is the idea that we're this body. Like this is what we are. We think, this is what we are. It's a great, 2 great sayings. One is from Krishnamurti. He said, it's not a good idea to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So, it's really important for us to question the official narratives in our society. And one of them is this I am the body idea, right? This thing. There's a kind of interesting thing in the Buddhist tradition. You know, when Buddhism first started, 500 BC or so, and they never had the idea of having a statue of the Buddha, right? That was not a concept, but they had several other symbols. One was the tree. He was, Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So the tree is a profound symbol, actually. Another was the wheel, and another one was the footprint. And I really like the footprint because if you go to the beach and you're walking along the beach and you see a footprint in the sand, normally you wouldn't go up to the footprint and say, "Hey, good morning, how are you doing?" That's just a footprint. It's not the being that made the footprint. This is a footprint waving, right? You cannot see me. You see a footprint. We see something, and we misidentify. We think this is it, and we look in the mirror and we look at our life and we wonder all these things. We have to realize what we are was never born and will never die. We express through a physical vehicle for a few decades, and as long as we identify just with this, it's very difficult to really attain and connect with our true nature and to be the light that we're intended to be. But once we understand at a deeper level, through quieting our mind, that's a big part of it, that we are the consciousness that makes this possible, then we can begin to connect with our inner guidance system, I think, more effectively. How many of you have some kind of a regular spiritual practice that you do on a daily basis? Good. I'd like to see everybody. It's really so important to have a regular practice of some kind where we just bring our mind and come into this moment. And I think the alternative to that, in a sense, is this understanding that we're all getting up in the morning, right? We're living our life, we're making decisions, we're going here, going there, whatever it is. We all have our life, and we're carrying out, right? We're carrying on and doing our life. So what is it that's propelling that? What is it that's actually creating the life that we're having as individuals? Where does it come from? I think it really comes from one of two fundamental places. Either we are following the program that we got from the time we were born, and we're just kind of fulfilling it out. My father told me I should do this if I wanted to be happy, and I should have this kind of a job and be this and so forth, and my mother and all the ads on TV, and we're bombarded with influences. And if we're basically a product of the influences, we could go to church every Sunday morning and all these things. But I would say there's no spirituality in that life, essentially. That's a life that's basically programmed. And it's inherently somewhat unsatisfactory because we're fulfilling expectations that probably are not ours. So to the degree that we actually begin to be guided by our own eternal true nature, then the spiritual life begins happening. And then we begin to, I think, connect with our purpose and our mission and the sense that we have a unique life here to live and unfold. And it's so fantastic when we have a community of people who are doing our best to do that and support each other in that. And I think everyone, if you found your way through the door here, you're already well on the way to questioning the official narratives in our society and to connecting with this inner guidance system, like Charles Fillmore said, going straight to headquarters, the truth of your own nature. So you all have a story that got you here. Madeline has a wonderful story, and I know all of you do, that to get here. I'll just say briefly my story, because I see I don't have that much time left before we wrap it up. Just briefly, I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts, back in the 1950s, and I remember growing up there, and it was kind of a neat place to grow up just because there was all this history, right? There was the Revolutionary War started there, and April 19th was the Patriots' Day, 1775. Hardly a man is now alive that remembers the famous day and year, the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So I knew all of that, and we were into it, and every April 19th, my father would get the gun off the wall, dressed up in his Minuteman outfit. We'd all march down to the Old North Bridge. We would reenact the battle, send the British Redcoats back to Boston, and celebrate the Revolution. And the whole idea is if we're living in a tyrannical situation, no, that's not going to work. We need to have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so forth. And then a little later in Concord, in the mid-1800s, there was another, more of a consciousness revolution. It was called Transcendentalism. The Transcendentalists were really the first ones to bring teachings from Asia into the United States. So Thoreau, for example, back in the mid-1800s, had the largest library of books on the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching and Buddhism and so forth. And so I learned to swim in Walden Pond and went to Thoreau School and Olcott School and was born in Emerson Hospital, this whole thing. And I discovered later that Charles Fillmore and the whole unity movement in many ways came out of or was influenced by, in a very positive way, by the Transcendentalist movement, and the spiritual healing, Christian Science, and all these different things kind of emerged out of this broadening, like the idea from the Taoist tradition of God as an infinite principle that we can learn to harmonize with, and then our life will be in accordance with something beyond just our little deluded self nature. Or the idea from the Hindu tradition of God as equally female as male, which kind of opened things up a lot. Or the idea from the Buddhist tradition of God as this infinite mind that we can unfold in our own mind, our own consciousness. And so when I went away to college, I remember in the early 1970s, I started reading some of these books, and it just sort of created a revolution within myself. And by the time I was toward the end of my education at Colby College in Maine, I started to really feel that it would be important to not just go take over my father's business, which was a newspaper business. And so I read this one book that I want to just mention toward the end of that, which was called Cosmic Consciousness. I don't know if anyone's ever read that book, but it was written back in the 1890s by Richard Buck. And he said, basically, everybody's walking around here, we're in a state of self-consciousness. Our consciousness is kind of confined to somewhat of a prison of being a separate self, and we're trying to get what we want and keep away what we don't want, and we're interacting and negotiating this whole thing. But he said a few rare people had been able to escape out of this confinement, and they had attained what he called cosmic consciousness by their efforts. And they were people like Jesus and the Buddha and the great founders of religions and great sages and saints and mystics and poets. Both men and women through the ages had attained a higher level of consciousness and a tremendous sense of freedom and a love for all living beings. And they were no longer bound by this pettiness and so forth. So I remember thinking, that's it. That's really important. And the thing that was interesting was he said, it is the destiny of all human beings to attain cosmic consciousness. That's really our purpose here. And so I remember going home on the vacations and talking to my parents and saying, Mom, Dad, you know about cosmic consciousness, right? That's why we're here. We're not just here to make money and trying to all that kind of stuff. And I remember my father saying, well, actually, this education is costing me quite a bit of money. And I don't know how this is going to help you get ahead in the world. But on the other hand, he had taught me to play the piano, and my mother was an artist, so they had some understanding of this. But my younger brother, Ed, to my delight, when I told him about cosmic consciousness, he said, yes, that's it. That's what we need to do. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So we talked to my parents about it right after I graduated from college. And they said, all right, so what are you going to do? And so we said, what we're going to do is what are we going to do? And then we thought, and we talked to each other, and then we hit on it. We knew there is one thing you cannot go wrong. Definitely attain cosmic consciousness if you do this one thing, and that was we'll go to California. So we thought if we went to California, it was 1975. San Francisco was really happening. And we thought that's what we'll do. But we didn't want to just simply drive there or fly or whatever. We thought we'll walk there. And we'll make it into a meditation walk. And like the sadhus of India, we'll just meditate and walk west. And so, we wouldn't bring any money. We just do it. And so we left in September, I remember. And so after about 3 or 4 weeks, we had gotten as far as Buffalo. And in Buffalo, it was freezing in October, and I remember thinking, oh man, I've got a bachelor's degree from a pretty good school, I can figure it out. We better head south. So we started just walking south, and we walked about 15 or 20 miles a day, every day, from one little town to the next, and little tiny backcountry roads, all the way down through upstate New York into Pennsylvania, across Pennsylvania into West Virginia, And then we got into West Virginia. The very first day in West Virginia, we always stayed on, usually, often anyway, we would stay on the floor of a church somewhere if we could just let us sleep there, and we'd go on the next morning. And they said, boys, you're in the Bible Belt. And I didn't know what that meant, but I found out. Okay. Anyway, we worked our way through West Virginia, the hills, and then we got into eastern Kentucky, into Appalachia. And we had really wonderful experiences. I mean, it was very interesting. There was a lot of times when we went a little bit hungry, but we never starved to death. And we kept going, and we kept meditating. And there was a teaching by Ramana Maharshi that we were following from India. He said that we should do a practice of self-inquiry, to just ask the question, who am I? And go deeper and deeper with that, to realize what we are. We're not our body. We're not our collection of thoughts and feelings and likes and dislikes and this whole cloud of collection that we are so proud of. What are we? So we kept working on that and going farther south and down into Tennessee, and we eventually ended up at the farm. And the farm in Tennessee at that point was about, 100 miles south of Nashville, and it was the largest hippie commune in the world at that time, and about 900 people, and they were all from California. So we thought, this is it, and we stayed there for a while, but then we felt drawn to go even farther south, and we ended up walking down to Alabama, and we ended up at a Zen, you probably don't believe me, but there was a Zen center in Alabama, and that was perfect. It was a Korean Zen center. And so we lived there for a while, and then we I eventually got out to San Francisco about a year or two later, and I remember discovering first it was a Tibetan Buddhist meditation center, and then another Zen center. So I ended up shaving my head and becoming a Zen Buddhist monk in Korea back in the 1980s. And then eventually came back to this country and got my PhD at Berkeley and taught college courses in a whole bunch of different things. And then eventually left that, moved into a 1971 Volkswagen bus, and started traveling to Unity churches, because I discovered way back then, in the 80s, actually in the 70s, but in the 80s I discovered Unity, and I realized as I got deeper and deeper into the essence of the world wisdom traditions, that Unity really has a tremendous gift to give to our society. And it's a direct pointing at these teachings in a way that's available to us, and is inspiring and instructive. And so I just felt the more I can just help promote and support the Unity teachings, that's something really valuable. And so I just want to thank all of you, because I know if you're coming here and you're doing your best to understand these teachings and to live them and to propagate them and to share them, that's living a life well. That's a life well lived. All of us are here for just a few short decades. It flies by very quickly. They interviewed the oldest living human being a while ago, a woman from Japan who was 119 years old. And they said, gosh, you're 119 years old. What's it like to be the oldest human being on earth? And she said, it goes by very quickly. So it does. And so every day is precious. Every day is a precious opportunity to learn, to grow, to contribute. We can be grateful for this precious human life, for the opportunity to hear these teachings, to contribute to this community, and to understand that what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore started is really a page in a much vaster library of wisdom. But when we understand it and live it, it opens up tremendous blessings for us, for our loved ones, and for everyone. And it all comes back to this inner wisdom that we have within us, our inner guidance system. So I'll just close with this final little teaching from the Buddhist tradition of the three jewels, which is the basic idea is that there's three jewels, and they are the precious essence, really, of the teaching. The Buddha is the first jewel. The Buddha represents what we would call in Unity the inner Christ. It's the divine, eternal self, and with a capital S, our true nature. And we can allow that to speak through us and so forth. The second jewel is the Dharma. And the Dharma basically is the teachings that help us to awaken the Buddha or the inner Christ. So the Buddha, the Dharma, and the third jewel is the Sangha. The Sangha is the community of people who are interested in awakening their true nature and propagating and sharing these teachings, the Dharma. And the Buddha said something interesting. He said, without the Sangha, there will be no Buddha and no Dharma. It's so important to understand that. We are products of our communities in many ways. So for us to contribute to and build a community based on the truth teachings of compassion and kindness for all living beings, on the abundant life that is for all of us, on the joy of our true nature and the freedom of spiritual awareness, and to not only talk about it, but to do our best to live it, then we are doing a great thing, really, for this whole society, which right now is being attacked by very divisive forces. So it's so important for us to do our best to live these teachings. So I want to just close by thanking my beautiful wife, Madeline. We've been now married 33 years. I have to say, the smartest thing I ever did, besides going vegan, was marrying my wonderful wife, Madeline. And these are her paintings up here. And together, I think all of us, we can continue, we can go forth and multiply this message in our lives. So again, I want to thank all of you and keep up the wonderful work you're doing. Hope to see you again another time. Bless you all. Thanks so much for all your efforts. Thank you.